What happens when the author of the most mysterious book of the Bible contacts a modern-day medium? We walk through his message step by step. Hello and welcome back to the Spiritual Freedom Show with Richard Lawrence. My name is Darren Ball, and this is the podcast helping you to awaken your chakras, to unlock your psychic powers, and to discover true spirituality. 2,000 years ago, John of Patmos wrote the book of Revelation after it was dictated to him by what he called an angel. Now this elevated saint has spoken again. On January 23rd, John of Patmos made further fascinating revelations about Armageddon and even of the second coming through the expert mediumship of Richard Lawrence. So tune in to discover how the book of Revelation was given in the first place to John of Patmos.
It had to be, as it were, sent down through the realms. Jesus to someone on a higher realm, someone not incarnate on the physical realm at that time, but not ascended either. And he tells us who that was.
Discover what happened after the crucifixion of the Master Jesus.
He was on earth for hundreds of years, and there are reports of him, for example, in South America.
Find out more about the loose ends that were left after Jesus' mission to earth.
The reference here is that Jesus knew that sooner or later that would have to be done, and being who he was, isn't this typical? He would fall to himself.
Yeah.
He was willing to do it himself. He felt the responsibility.
Yeah.
Or his greatest disciple, that's a reference to Saint Peter, a very, very powerful and very great avatar.
And finally, discover what the second coming really was about and how the plan was changed by further intervention by enlightened extraterrestrials coming to Earth. Don't miss this show.
Richard,
Darren.
so boy, do we have some fireworks in store for everyone today.
It's a bit different, isn't it?
It's different. This one is different, yeah. So I mentioned in the last episode this list of 37 communicators, just a fraction really of those people who you've been in contact with over the last 45 years or so of practicing mediumship.
Yeah.
But today's show is about one of those communicators and a message they gave just recently. And there is so much revealed in this message that I'm really happy that we've been able to make this into a show.
Can I say something? The claims that I make about my mediumship, although some of the messages or some of the content of it was published by Dr. King in his lifetime in Cosmic Voice, and although he set me up as a psychic consultant, I want to just say this is not Aetherius Society teaching. It is not a requirement of anyone in the Aetherius Society to believe it or otherwise. It's absolutely fine. I don't care at all. But I'm putting it over. I think it's a good illustration, mind you, of the development you can gain through the Aetherius Society. And I think it's of great interest. But I want to take that sort of off people's shoulders, or if anyone, I don't know of anyone who's concerned about that. But I just feel I should make that step, because the last thing I want to do is cause any complication or confusion or misrepresent anything at all. This is what we're talking about is completely true. And I know that to be true, but it's not Aetherius Society teaching.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Now, this particular communicator,
Yeah.
just as a little bit of a backstory here, which I'd like to get out of you, wasn't actually on the list that you published in the first place.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
He communicated with me first, I don't know, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago, roughly, when I'd been told that I had to not take messages from anyone below level 5. It meant sometimes that if I wanted to get a message from someone below level 5, and it was something that I needed to get, it would sometimes have to be relayed by somebody higher up. Whereas previously, sometimes it had been a bit the reverse. But anyway, I was told that. And after that, one of the first ones that did communicate was this person who described himself and named himself as Father John. And his messages from the very, very beginning, and I put a couple on my website. I've got a section on my website, channeling. People can have a look. They can see messages I've had there from Dante and Francis Bacon and others, including the one we're talking about today.
Yeah.
But the first one or two were very nice messages about the Aetherius Society. So from the beginning, it was clearly an Aetherius Society orientated person who was interested in me, not because I'm Richard Lawrence at all, but because of the work I do, the connections I have with the Master, Dr. George King, the connections I have with and through the Aetherius Society. And from the beginning, he was incredibly supportive of the efforts that we make here on our lowly realm, because he made it clear and said, it's far more difficult for you than it is for us. Now, here's a person who's on level 5 or 6. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if he wasn't on 6. And yet he paid tribute to our efforts because he said it's far more difficult. And it became clear that the thing is there, when you go to the higher realms, I'm not saying everybody there is in a sort of active Ethereal Society person, but if they're not, they have no problem with it. There are no barriers, and not just Ethereal Society, Theosophy, yoga, whatever you want to say. There aren't the materialistic forces, the forces of doubt, the forces of fear, the forces of selfishness, trying to oppose you, trying to detune you, or not even trying, just innately bombarding you. And this makes it much more difficult. And I want to say this to viewers and listeners of the Spiritual Freedom Show. Kudos to you. No, really, well done, because it is difficult to take your mind into the areas that we are going in on this show, on this realm. It is not difficult on a level like 4, never mind 5, never mind 6. It's the natural flow of things. And even if a person there isn't engaged in Ethereal Society at all much, they're certainly not against it. They probably know about it. If they don't, they kind of support it to a greater or lesser degree. So that makes it far, far easier. And also you're in tune there with the vibrations that emanate there. This Spiritual Freedom Show is going against the vein of a lot of things that happen here, of some of which are generated from lower astral realms. You don't have to look too far to see it. And that it makes it more difficult. And he appreciated this right from the beginning. So that was Father John. And then no more than that. Now, when I compiled my list of 37 people that I've had messages from over the last 45 years who are recorded somewhere in history, they're either fairly famous, very famous, or not really famous, but if you look them up, you'll find them. One of them, Nigel de Longchamps, I think was his name, was also an 11th century poet, which I'd never heard of. And I thought, whoa, it was amazing. So I compiled that list, and I didn't put Father John on it because who is he? Father John.
Father John?
Lots of Father Johns around. So and I went to bed that night, I got a sort of tap on the shoulder that he wanted to be on this list. So I was like thinking to myself, well, how can I put you on the list when you just call yourself Father John? So it's then that he told me, I'd suspected this, by the way, but it's then that he told me his name, and he gave his name as John of Patmos.
I think that's a revelation in itself, because as people may or may not be familiar with, John of Patmos is the one who, let's say, received and then wrote down what became the Book of Revelation. In the Bible.
And it makes perfect sense, because he's the one who coined the phrase Armageddon. And the Ethereal Society details and celebrates, actually, the victory in Armageddon, which didn't happen on this realm, happened on a lower one. We call it Carmelite. And there's a massive parallel, and this is no doubt what drew him to us on the higher realm. And it's the work of certain spiritual forces or adepts in combating evil, which was obviously the author of the Book of Revelation would be absolutely attuned to.
Totally.
Now, it's not Saint John. Some in the church don't differentiate between Saint John the disciple and Saint John, the author of the Book of Revelation, but they are not the same person. Saint John, I believe, is a planetary master now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's one of those that we have. St. Peter's another one. St. Paul is another one. Now, not necessarily then, but now. St. Peter was then. He was an incarnated extraterrestrial. But John of Patmos, different person, working, I don't know, maybe 90 AD, they reckon, something like that, after Jesus' resurrection. Jesus was still on earth. It's interesting in itself.
That's another revelation.
We will come to that. Yeah. But anyway, John of Patmos wrote this. and he was a medium. So I have a great interest in him.
Yeah, it makes it even more interesting, doesn't it? Because
to me,
he reveals some things about mediumship, I think, in this that will be instructive for people.
Yeah.
I thought we could walk through this step by step. I thought I could read this and maybe you could comment on it.
Okay.
On different points of it. Maybe I'll stop after one or two paragraphs.
Sure.
Any way you want to jump in.
And if people miss it, it's up on my website, richardlawrence.co.uk.
The text version.
Yeah.
Yeah, got you. Okay. I think what also people can look forward to is some of the amazing synchronicities that happened, around this particular message, which I think reveal even more about it and its credibility.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
I'm going to kick us off here. So John begins. We all appreciate your dedication and that of all your helpers in the promotion of the greatest teachings ever delivered to Earth through the Aetherius Society.
Can I just stop you there? Sorry.
Yeah, stop me anyway.
I think your helpers isn't my personal helpers. I don't take it to mean that. I take it to mean helpers of the Aetherius Society.
Got you.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
He makes an interesting point in this next one here as well, that I have been granted permission to make further revelations through your good self, just as I was empowered to do so thousands of years ago.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? So he's been granted permission.
That I think is interesting.
I have found that now any guide giving a message, to me anyway, has to gain permission. I'm very curious as to who gives the permission. I tried to find that out after the message. I wasn't told. I suspect it could be a chain of command somewhere going upwards. Maybe because of the content of it.
Perhaps.
He couldn't just reveal all this because he'd gone low profile as Father John prior to this. I had my suspicions, but they'd never been confirmed. So he needed permission. And I think when he says he was empowered to do so thousands of years ago, he doesn't mean make revelations through me. He means deliver revelations.
Got you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just going back to the first paragraph there, you've talked a lot about his sort of attunement with the Aetherius Society and the fact that he's, the appreciation of what we're doing on this, what people are doing on this realm, working for spirituality.
Yeah.
So then he goes on. He says, my mind has been impressed with the thoughts and emanations of the beloved Master Jesus himself prior to this message being delivered. In the same way, the mind of Prophet Amos was impressed by this holy being before he spoke to me on that island in those days to warn of the event to come at that time of Armageddon. He spoke from the highest realm which he then inhabited to my lowly self in angelic form, as I considered it then. I also received visions, and other scribes made additions to what is now called the Book of Revelation.
I think we should pause there, don't you?
There's a lot in
those.
There's
a lot there. First of all, the first line actually is not of the message, but we should say this was given on the 23rd of January, which happens to be the birth date of Dr. King. I hadn't really considered that much at the time, at 7:35 in the morning. But no doubt that was chosen deliberately, I would have thought. So his mind has been impressed with the thoughts and emanations of the beloved Master Jesus himself prior to this message being delivered. So that doesn't mean to say that this is a message from Jesus, by the way, but that he has been, well, as he says, I can't use other words, impressed with those emanations and thoughts himself. And that's, I think, is a very deliberate parallel, as we're going to find out, of how he took the book of Revelations. Because in the Bible, and I looked this up afterwards, it says, I think, that an angel of the Lord delivered it essentially to John of Patmos, and Jesus delivered it to this angel of the Lord. So it tells me that when he was physically alive on Patmos, he wasn't able directly to receive a transmission, if you want to call it that, as, say, Dr. King has done with the beautiful 12 blessings from Jesus. He wasn't advanced enough. He wasn't capable enough. I'm thinking he would have used the mental transmission or telepathic method, not the deep trance method. And it had to be, as it were, sent down through the realms.
Got you. So it's from Jesus
to someone on a higher realm, someone not incarnate on the physical realm at that time, but not ascended either at that time. And he tells us who that was, the prophet Amos. Now, I must say, I didn't know anything about Amos. When this first came to me, Amos is a name that Because before actually getting this message and writing it down,
Yeah.
and as I mentioned, he'd contacted me and said he didn't want to be left off the list.
Yeah.
And I was sort of receiving some idea that it was Amos.
Mm.
And Amos to me is a word I think, God, that sounds like a biblical name.
Mm.
But it could be, from all my knowledge anyway, one of the children of Noah all the way through to someone in the New Testament, of,
Yeah.
in
Fair
Jesus' time or after, the apostle or something. I didn't know who he was at all. So I looked him up before I got this message, but not in any detail, and found that he was a prophet.
I see.
So then by the time the message was given to him, he was called the prophet Amos.
I see.
But I didn't know any more than that.
Mm.
He was a Hebrew prophet. That's all I knew. And we're told here by John of Patmos, the mind of prophet Amos was impressed by this holy being. Before he spoke to me on that island, the island being Patmos,
Yeah.
Greek island,
Mhm.
in those days, it's said that he was in a cave in Patmos,
Okay.
Greek island, in those days, to warn of the event to come at the time of Armageddon. Now, there's so much of interest there. Amos, it turns out, was a prophet, and none of this I knew,
Mm-hmm.
who about 8th century BC, they reckon, spoke and preached in the area around Armageddon. Now, Armageddon, as it turns out, is named after a mountain, I think it's called Tel Megiddon, but you find
Oh,
it
I
there.
see.
It's an
Okay.
actual place. And Amos was warning of the day of judgment.
Mm.
And I think he talked about what we might call the sorting of the wheat from the chaff.
Okay. Yeah.
But he talked about the sifting, I think, in a sieve. But people being sorted on the day of judgment. And he did it around the area of Armageddon. And so I think that must be why the name Armageddon is used by John of Patmos in the book of Revelation. Because why would he pick a mountain,
I see. I see.
in a particular region to summarize the whole battle of all the forces of darkness and evil
So that's where the
and
name
light
comes from. Yeah. Gotcha.
in the future? And now it's becoming clear, and I wouldn't have known this before I got the message, that it's because he was being impressed by Amos. And although, as I understand it, all this I've looked up since getting the message, John of Patmos wouldn't have spoken Hebrew necessarily. He would have spoken some form of Greek, some local form of Greek.
Yeah.
There are Hebrew influences and references in the book of Revelation. And specifically, but don't forget, in those days, we're talking what we call the Old Testament, the Torah and so on, the Jewish scriptures, the prophets, they weren't contained in any Bible.
Yeah.
I think it was St. Jerome in maybe the 4th century who brought the Old Testament into the Christian faith.
I see.
But these influences are in the book of Revelation. So you have Jesus impressing the mind of Amos, then on a higher realm, and then you have Amos channeling it through visions and probably the spoken word to John of Patmos, who was recording it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And as he says, there are other additions. There is a little subtext here which I think is very interesting, which is that the Master Jesus was alive on earth. And I mean, that's something one could, can we do a little digression?
I think it's worth it.
Can we say that the ascension of Jesus is, to me, an utter miracle? Now, I want to make it clear what I mean by that. It's not a miracle that a being of that caliber could ascend, because he was above ascension before he ever came here. He was above earthly ascension. It's not that.
Being from another planet.
And as far as being from another planet, and as far as we know, he didn't come to earth in order to ascend. He came to earth in order mainly to die. But he used his death to bring about on earth what you might call terrestrial ascension. Still very limited for him, but whereby he could live in an ascended body, like, say, the body of Count Saint Germain, or let's take the highest of all examples, the body of the Lord Babaji, and others, Master Kutumi, El Mariah, Lord Maitreya, the second most elevated in the hierarchy, and they are a hierarchy. Some people don't like hierarchy, but they are a strict hierarchy. A hierarchy of wisdom, though.
Yeah, that's an important point.
Not political power per se. There is politics of a kind, but it's a wise politics. Why do I say it's a miracle? To me, it's a miracle for this reason. To go through ascension, you have to, in an earth physical body, enter the highest state of consciousness, what would be called nirvana in the East. Cosmic consciousness, but pure cosmic consciousness, with no limits, no conditions, no blockages, a complete and total raising of consciousness into the highest chakra. Right. That is extremely difficult. That's the most difficult thing to do and requires, among other things, great bravery. Did you know that Tumo, which is the sort of Tibetan version, if you might say, of Kundalini Yoga, actually means the brave one?
Does it?
Tum, I looked it up this morning, is bravery. Mo is a female word,
Oh, interesting.
meaning oneness or non-duality, they would say in Buddhism. So, and Jesus, of course, had practiced Tumo, which is why I mention it, partly. But he had to enter that state while enduring or just after enduring crucifixion. Not in a cave. This is the miracle to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's ever thought about this. A cave somewhere in isolation, an ashram, a beautiful place you could go, or even a wonderful monastery, or somewhere just quiet and perfect, enabling you to enter that state and then move on. You've got no karma left in this physical world, and you can move into the state of ascension. And if you're compassionate and brilliant and wonderful enough, choose to stay here to help us, not go on to other planets, but stay here to help us. That's how it would work. But in the case of Jesus, he was enduring a crucifixion. Somehow, at some point, he brought about his ascension. It's not surprising that he could do that.
Wow.
He was a pure being. I would think any interplanetary master, if they set their mind to it, could do that, if that was their mission, because they're higher than that anyway. But to do it under those conditions, so that's why I say it's a miracle. The other very interesting thing is, although he was on Earth for hundreds of years, and there are reports of him, for example, in South America and other parts of the world, this great intelligence, he didn't stand on a mountain or a hill and deliver a teaching which was recorded like the Sermon on the Mount was. He didn't walk around healing lepers, causing people to rise from the dead, feeding the 5,000, etc., etc. He was under, as all ascended masters are, tremendous limitation, karmic limitation. It's a strange thing. They have unlimited powers compared to us, and yet they can't use them in the way they could use more limited powers if they hadn't ascended. In certain respects, not in all respects, because they hold the karmic balance of life on Earth. Without them, we wouldn't be able to continue here at all, in this kind of civilization anyway. So coming to the message and the contact with John of Patmos, because you might think he's on Earth, he's in an ascended body, he could manifest in Patmos quite easily and say, "Hey, write this down."
Exactly.
Or even write it himself. But no, he couldn't do that. He had to work through the higher realm. Somehow he impressed it on, whether he impressed it telepathically on Amos, or whether he brought him into his presence on a higher realm, this we don't know. And then Amos had the job of imparting it to somebody here. Tremendous lessons in this about the physical realm, the restrictions of the physical realm, but also the tremendous power, in certain regards, the unequaled power, karmic regards, of the physical realm. And it's a strange sort of, it's not quite a paradox, but it's a conflicting thing. You can do things here karmically you can't do on any other realm at all, including ascending. But on the other hand, it's greatly limited.
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons in that. I thought just before you go on, you mentioned briefly about how some of the language in the book of Revelation, there's some Hebrew references.
Yeah, apparently so, yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm no expert on the book of
sure.
Revelation, let me say. Sorry, John of Patmos.
Yeah, but you had this interesting experience on that morning, didn't you, with the Israeli dealer who came?
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, so after I got this message, my wife is, I will say, a very good art picture restorer. That's what she has a studio in our house, and she works there. So from time to time, different art dealers come to the door with either an or pottery or something for her to repair, or they come to see her. So it's a strange thing that after this particular message at 7:35, knock on the door, happened to be an Israeli art dealer, very nice gentleman, came to the door to see Alison, and I happened to answer the door. So I said to him, well, if you just wait a moment, I'll just get Alison. And he said, yes, but I've got a gift for you. Now, in all the many people who Alison's worked with, no one's ever come to the door and said, I've got a gift for you, for me. I'm nothing to do with it. I'm just the door answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Got a gift for me? He said, yeah, I've got a gift for you. And I said, well, that's very kind of you. What's that? And he said, it's a dictionary, and it's a Hebrew-English dictionary. And that's a sign of it, really. And that's just like an hour and a half after I'd got this message about Prophet Amos, who was a Hebrew, and of course it was being translated through the book of Revelation into English.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to go on to the next paragraph here. So he continues, the Master Jesus who then resided upon earth, but in a very high spiritual body, which could only be used at certain times in specific ways, wished to warn of the battles to come because he knew that his mission had left a certain incompleteness. I'll just read the next one before we pause. His brilliantly executed plan exploited the weakness of certain dark forces to bring a particular, absolutely essential result, but by design, this left them in a position of apparent power.
Yeah, this won't be any surprise to people who are very familiar with the Theorist Society teachings. It's a very interesting point, though, that's being made here by John of Patmos, that the Master Jesus obviously would know and did know that in his strategy, and it was a strategy, his death was obviously engineered by himself, and it's, I think, very apparent. You could see it really in the fact that he deliberately caused a stir. Won't go into the whole story of it. Provoked it, drew attention. Even, I would say, used Judas, as Judas not being actually a traitor, but someone who was under orders, and what terrible orders they were, to betray him. Actually duped the money lenders, not the other way around, and so on. It was a deliberate move. He chose his moment to die. He could have died before then, but he skillfully avoided it in a brilliant way, such as the great story about when they tried to trap him, and he said, well, let he who was without sin cast the first stone. And there are other stories. We won't go in through the Bible now. I'm not a biblical expert, by the way, but he clearly brought about his death, and he brought about it at a particular time, and through that death he took karma, and through that karma he enabled civilization to continue. But part of his plan was to use certain dark forces, not the crowds who called for his death, but he used the forces behind that crowd to bring about his death. And the forces, this was the problem, thought they'd gained a great victory.
Gotcha.
Which I'm sorry to say is represented, not wishing to offend Catholics or anybody else, by the crucifix. It is not a positive spiritual image because it's a symbol of death. His crucifixion actually became a symbol of life, which is a symbol of the cross, which
just the plain cross.
The plain cross, which we and many others use. And I know people who have crucifixes and value them don't look at it that way. They're not thinking this is a symbol of death at all. They see it as a symbol of their love for Jesus, and I respect that. I'm just being sort of technical, as it were, about it. I would recommend, and Dr. King would recommend, a plain cross to such people.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you like, an image of Jesus in the Ascension. There's a beautiful, the Raphael painting, which I've actually seen in the Vatican, of his Ascension, is a wonderful thing indeed. Anyway, they brought this about, and they were left with certain power, the dark forces, and Master Jesus would have known that would have to be dealt with at some point, and he would know, that a battle was going to take place at some time in the future between those forces and the forces of light. And this is why he came. So that's why this other book, the book of Revelation, needed to be added to the Bible.
Yeah, so that's
It was incomplete. It's like a postscript. Yes, this happened. This is greatness, but there's something still to be done here. And that's what was given to John of Patmos.
Wow. That's amazing. That's really amazing. I'll just go on to this next one, which is another revelation. He says, he also knew that behind even these forces hid another who must one day be conquered, and it would fall to himself or his greatest disciple to rid the world of this foe of all that is good and holy.
Yeah, that's a reference to the intelligence, the person who's been called Satan. It doesn't mean, though, that he's the only dark force at all. He had a habit of hiding and deliberately hiding to protect himself or herself. He wasn't limited to gender if he didn't choose to be. He's very powerful, not all powerful, not the opposite of God. As
exactly.
Those people in churches or anywhere else who portray the dark force, the evil force, Satan, whatever they might call it, Beelzebub, whatever, as on a par with God, this is good, this is bad, are ridiculous. Ridiculous. It was a brilliant human being who'd gathered tremendous power through the most brutal, dark methods over generations, and was behind even the kind of forces that would bring about, say, the death of Jesus. Wouldn't need to do it himself, but could see that it was done.
Yeah.
And so the reference here is that Jesus knew that sooner or later that would have to be done. And being who he was, isn't this typical? He would fall to himself.
Yeah.
He was willing to do it himself. He felt the responsibility.
Yeah.
Or his greatest disciple, that's a reference to Saint Peter, who wasn't the person, again, portrayed as a weak person, not at all, a very, very powerful and very great avatar, Saint Peter, who built the church. The church went wrong, of course, in certain regards, especially during the Inquisition and so on, but he did build it, and obviously others helped, St. Paul being one of those others, but one of the two of them, is said here, would have to tackle this sooner or later. They couldn't just leave it.
Yeah.
It was unfinished business, we might say,
Yeah.
as far as they're concerned. Isn't their job, as far as I don't see them being responsible, but they see themselves as being responsible.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, that, so there was always this intention that he or St. Peter was going to come back. I mean,
yeah, and you can see that reflected actually in the biblical writings.
Yes, yeah.
Because he would have been willing to do it clearly, and he could have done it. Of course, he could, and so could have St. Peter done it, dealt with Satan if they'd had the powers to come back and do that, and that's what is predicted in the end time, the apocalypse described in the book of Revelation.
I think if we tie it into this next paragraph, I think this is even more interesting, reflecting about what's included in the Bible, because it says next, we now know how that plan changed. Thanks be to the mighty Adepts to whom I have dedicated my existence through the Aetherius Society.
Okay, well, this is a very interesting sentence. The Adepts refer to a great spiritual intelligences, which there's much information on in the Aetherius Society. Very key thing, I've dedicated my existence through these to the Adepts. So he, I would think...
This is John of Patmos now.
This is John of Patmos, I would think, is a person who discovered the Aetherius Society through the battles in the hells, what you might call the hells. Now, cutting a long story short, these Adepts fought battles down there, including what was going to be the Battle of Armageddon, named later Carmelite, but brilliantly, and one of their main strategic accomplishments was to prevent it from reaching this realm. It was fought in lower realms.
Yeah, so actually Armageddon has happened.
So it has happened in the sense that Satan is being transmuted. But don't for 1 minute think that means
We're off the hook.
yeah, even forces have all gone, or there are, you know, it's a bigger version of, say, like something like the mafia. You know, you get one godfather goes, others jump in. And this is to the power of a million because they are super powerful, some of them. They're not infallible, though, and they can do foolish things, strangely enough. But without going into all that, have got brilliant, some of them are brilliant, but not brilliant enough for these adepts who fought this battle, which impressed John of Patmos, who may have seen it as the person who predicted it.
What a connection.
He may have seen it. It was changed from his predictions in certain respects by confining it, which they deliberately set out to do, into those realms. I think it would have taken place on this realm, and it would have had to been dealt with by whoever was and would have been the next master. Yeah. And, you know, can I just throw this in? That some of our teachings that we have, 12 blessings, 9 freedoms, especially the 9 freedoms, but both of those, 12 blessings are going to be referred to soon in this, weren't originally delivered, or weren't going to originally be delivered, by the way, for people who hadn't been through the sorting. They were going to be delivered to the sorted.
I see.
Or to be used by the sorted. After this, maybe on the cusp of this, as a set of teachings out of this.
I see.
Now, they were given early, of course. Now, in the period we're in now, which is the post-Armageddon period, but not the post-transmutation of evil period, that still exists very much so. We have to look at our world and we can see
it's
it.
Evident.
Now, though, we are engaged in helping, trying to help and serve and save the saved, not the sorted.
I see, yeah.
The saved, not the sorted. Those who've been saved in this battle of Armageddon, but are still here, will be sorted eventually, but in the meantime, because of this, there's more chance for them to be saved. Though by now, that sorting might have taken place had not this intervention referred to here by the adepts occurred.
I mean, one interesting angle on this for me is that it just shows how there was this original intention, the plan that was going to be dealt with in this way.
Yeah.
Then the adepts came, and
they came because the great intelligences, the wise ones, the advanced, wonderful beings who spiritually govern, and determine the progress of this solar system, saw that they would be needed, and that changed what the Master Jesus says here, you know, or is said here, was prepared to do himself.
Exactly, yeah.
But it was done in a very different way by specialists who are, I mean, revered by Jesus. He gave a transmission called The Three Saviors Here, about 3 of these adepts. And he says, what I did was naught compared to them. And he holds them in the highest regard. But they are absolute specialists in dealing with evil because they have a great love for God, number one. They have a great love for humanity, number 2. But they also have a love for the dark forces, who they're fighting.
Yeah.
You know this old Buddhist, and not just Buddhist, but general thing, do no harm. Is one of the precepts. I think it's called ahimsa in Buddhism. Ahimsa, it's general. It's not nearly enough, though, may I say. It's not enough. It was perfectly enough then for that path, that meditative path then. But in the end, though, doing no harm is vital, but it's not proactive enough.
Yeah.
And sometimes a dark force needs to be, inverted commas, harmed for its own good.
So that it stops doing bad.
Yes, you're helping it by fighting it, not by just being passive and saying, well, I won't do anything with you.
Yeah. So it's good for that force as
Yeah,
well.
and they know that, these adepts we're talking about, and they love these forces. It's strange as it may sound, and they are motivated not by conquest, but by love of God, number one. But they know that if they can help to transmute these forces, it's good for these forces to be stopped in their tracks and moved onwards in their evolution. It might be painful. In that sense, you could call it harm for them, but it's good for them. And sometimes, that is called for. And I think we all know that in small ways in our lives, in the people we care about, in dealings.
We can see it.
There's a time for it, but this is on a global scale. And it's something they are brilliant specialists in. They're great warriors. They are fighters. They have tremendous technical capability. They can match themselves up to these dark forces with magic as well, but they have a great love for them, and that's it's in this day and age, even in small ways. We need to fight in spiritual ways, not and we've talked about that before.
Yeah, with light and truth.
Yeah, with truth. It might even sometimes it's hurtful to someone to tell them the truth, but there's time to do it, and they know the time, and they fight their battles within the law of karma. And they won't stray from that law, these adepts, ever.
Yeah, I think this is a massive revelation, sort of updates where we are on Earth at the moment. This Armageddon has happened. It's left us in this position, like you say, where we've been saved by that, but now need to work in even greater earnest towards...
Yeah, and there are people who are now here who might have already been sorted to their detriment. Yeah. And they've been saved from that, if they are,
for this
whoever they are.
Yeah,
if not for this intervention,
I'll go on. So he says, I am John of Patmos. I serve as a bishop in our church. I revere the 12 blessings as a practice and as a path. So maybe we just pause there on the 12 blessings.
Yeah, so, that's something I suspected, to be honest, because there's another which I haven't sort of put on a list of communicators because I think it could be misleading because her name is Persephone. People have an idea of Greek gods and goddesses and so forth. And it's not quite what it seems, but she's been there a long time, I believe, on a higher realm. And I got the impression from her that John, Father John, as he was calling himself, was actually a bishop, not a priest, and that she, Persephone, was assisting him too in certain services, which is a very beautiful thing.
It is, yeah.
And as I say, this is my take, this is what I'm told. It's not a requirement. That's why I made my statement at the beginning of anyone in the Aetheric Society to take all this as fact. If they don't wish to, disregard it if you want. I don't mind at all. But for those who are interested and open, it's wonderful to know, I think, that there's such a person. I really relate to John of Patmos. He's a bishop. I'm lowly. I'm not, I don't compare myself to him, but he's a medium, or was, possibly still is. And he, as he says there, he reveres the 12 blessings as a practice and as a path. The 12 blessings, for those who know it, and we talk about it, we do it online, people can join in, 12blessings.org. There's a lot of practices in that.
Oh, yeah. We've talked
which
about
you
one
might
too.
not have seen as practices, but they are practices. Practice in stillness, practices in raising the chakras, practices in bringing about a state of peace. There are many practices in there in addition to the prayers and the way we use it to help the world.
It's just sort of inspiring to hear him talk about the 12 blessings, the fact that he is a bishop in the church, and the fact that he practices the 12 blessings in this way.
He lives it, I believe.
Yeah.
I would think. There's a wonderful line, just to give you one example, at the end, I think, of the 9th blessing, after the blessing, where the Master Jesus talks about various things we should be doing, and he says, you will find a great peace, and these aren't the exact words, a satisfaction, I think. Maybe he says beyond words, I'm not sure.
Yeah, beyond all words.
All words, thank you. And something even greater than that.
Yeah.
Something like that. And it's true, there is something even greater than peace. And that's a teaching, and it's a practice, because otherwise you just find peace and stay there and just not bother again. But peace is like a default setting if you're able to find it. If you want to look at it in computer terms, it's a default position once you find it, but you have to leave it.
I see.
But it doesn't go, and you can return to it. But this greater thing than peace, of course, is knowing your destiny, if you like, the desire to serve. This is a mark of advancement, actually, the desire to serve. Some people don't have it. They work at it, credit to them. We don't all of us don't have it all the time, if we're honest. But it is a mark of advancement, and you want to do it, and you will leave peace if necessary to do it, and that's why it's greater. But inside, it's the most wonderful thing, and it's the most satisfying thing there is, because it's knowing you're in tune with your higher self.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. I'll continue with the message.
Please do.
Here. These would have been given after the final day of judgment, as you were saying before. The awful battles would already have been fought, and you might have received this wisdom from this realm, as I did in those days, delivered by an angel of the Lord, as I perceived it then. It is not known who would have received this teaching here from the being of light. But you are correct that Sir Francis Bacon could have helped with his beautiful literary phraseology before it was transmitted possibly to yourself. But it would have been a mere fraction of that received by our great master without the transmission of the holy voice, and it certainly would not have become the powerful practice it became under his tutelage. I myself would have been honored to play a part in the communication process as others helped the prophet Amos in those days, with my own unworthy efforts and limited reception of the totality of those revelations by the Lord.
That's quite a stunner, isn't it? And for those who are familiar with the Aetherius Society, they will know that the 12 blessings was delivered something like 52 years early.
Yeah.
That takes us to the year 2010.
Yep.
I don't know who people actually think would have received the 12 blessings in the year 2010, because Dr. King wasn't here. And even who'd be able to and how they'd go about it. So John of Patmos isn't really being dogmatic here. He's saying possibly this and it might have been that.
Known, et cetera.
But it's quite possible, he's saying, that it would have been me or somebody like me, but he's saying it might have been me. Now, if it had been me, let me say here and now, it would be extremely disappointing to people who know the 12 blessings as we've got it. It would be a fraction of what we've got. So this is a tribute to Dr. King.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can completely see why it was brought forward, apart from giving everyone a chance to use it.
For all these years.
All of that, but also because it's now goes down in a much, much greater form. And we discussed this on our last show about mediumship and channeling and so on. I don't think there's anyone on earth who would have been able to enter samadhic trance or would have even known enough to enter samadhic trance and use it for mediumship in the year 2010. Also, I think, given our connection with the Master Jesus and his teachings, by I mean the Aetherius societies, and our knowledge of the Adepts and our knowledge of Armageddon, it would have been very advantageous for it to be given through someone connected to Dr. George King and the Aetherius Society. So I can't really argue with the idea it might have been me, because I can't think of anyone else. So if somebody's got another idea, send it through to us at the Spiritual Freedom Show. But I can understand this. I have to be it. But what I would say, it would be a very, very different thing. It doesn't mean, and please don't get this wrong, I'm in any way, or he is in any way, in fact he clearly isn't, because he makes it clear, comparing what Dr. King did to what would have happened. And what he's saying here, it would have had to be given through the realms, because in 2010, I simply could not in any way have received direct transmission, even in a mental transmission, from the Master Jesus. And I don't think anyone else could have done that I know of. And so therefore, it would have been a bit like the book of Revelation, but instead of it being given to Jesus, to the prophet Amos, to John of Patmos, it would have been the Master Jesus, possibly to John of Patmos on another realm, possibly to Francis Bacon, who I'm a medium for, because if you look at the 12 blessings, it's very much in a lot of it in 17th century English, actually, and that's been commented on by literary people too. The phraseology is very 17th century. It's very New English Bible orientated. It's very poetic, beautifully poetic. Now, Dr. King himself wouldn't need Sir Francis Bacon to be poetic in that way at all, because he has raised Kundalini to the throat center and above. But I mention the throat center because in that center, as I think he's written, you can speak finer words or write finer words than Shakespeare ever wrote.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
He wouldn't need that help, but somebody like me would need that help. And so Francis Bacon might have played a role in that as well. John of Patmos might have played a role in it. By the time it was eventually, written down with the best will in the world, with the best concentration I could muster to get my consciousness to the level of a Bacon or even the level of a John of Patmos, who didn't communicate with me in 2010, but maybe I could have done that in a different setting. Even so, you wouldn't have the sound, you wouldn't have the energy, you wouldn't have the purity. You would have been through these various layers to get there, so it wouldn't be as superb. We'd hope it would be pretty accurate, hopefully, but not pluperfect like you get with Dr. King. And here's another big one. I think we're going to go. Actually, I think John of Patmos goes into this. We wouldn't have known how to use it.
Yeah, he says there, doesn't he?
Well, I'll let you read the next bit.
Well, I think it's just under whose tutelage it would not have become the powerful practice it became.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right. So, people think, the Master Jesus gave us this practice, and he did. But the practice as we use the 12 blessings, the way we use it, wasn't given to us by the Master Jesus. It was given to us by Dr. George King.
Yeah.
He told us how to do it, to raise the hands, to visualize the white light in the palms and the heart center, to say a heading, then say a prayer. This is the Dr. King's, understated, humble offering. He doesn't push this point, but it was him. In fact, some people have never thought this point. Some very senior people in the Ethereal Society have told me that it never occurred to them, although they know it.
Yeah.
They think, Jesus gave us this. No, Jesus and Dr. King gave us this practice together, not just in his mediumship, but in his tutelage, as John of Patmos calls it. And so that none of that would have existed. You look at the Sermon on the Mount, which is a weaker document, much weaker, because it was given at a different time to a different kind of audience, but it's a similar principle: blessed are the meek, blessed and so on. Is that a practice? No. They don't raise their hands and say, blessed are the meek. They go into prayer, and somebody, not even prayer actually, probably the morning reading,
sort of proves
somebody reads it out,
Yeah.
and they sit there thinking, well, this is interesting. It doesn't matter, I'll think about my washing or whatever. It doesn't matter how far they're concentrating or not, they're there, and that's good enough. I'm sorry, I don't disrespect people in church. I'm sure some are avidly listening, actually, so let me correct myself.
Yeah.
But either way, it's not a practice. And this, without Dr. King, wouldn't have been the practice it is. So it's thousands of times greater because of the way it was given. But here, the first time that I know of, John of Patmos answers how it would have happened had it happened in the original plan 52 years later.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's like the language is almost like a vestige of the original plan. That's used in the 12 blessings.
Yes, it is. It is, because obviously Jesus wanted that kind of language used.
I'll go on. So he says, we recognize your role today is far more important than it would have been even if you had received this wisdom, for you can, with your wonderful team, help far more people to inherit the new dawning epoch than would otherwise have done so. And you can help Mother Earth in some tiny degree, which is an unfathomable honor. I am sure you agree.
Yes, so let me again say, when he says your wonderful team, I don't take it as my personal team. I take it as the Ethereal Society's wonderful team, and globally too. But it's interesting that, because he's saying even if you had received the 12 blessings in the way we've described, and it's only a possibility that it would have been me, but even if it had been, What we are doing now is even more important than this. And this is where you can see the missions that we do, the direct cooperation we have with beings from other worlds, the knowledge of spiritual pushes at certain dates and how we cooperate with them, and so on. The way we go to holy mountains and the various things that we do are even more potent as a role than even taking that would have been, which would have been extremely important, privileged thing. And I think is prophesied. Certainly, I believe prophesied, I think, by a message in collaboration between Alice Bailey and D.K. Master D.K. talks about 3 phases. I don't remember the exact words, but the formative phase, which he said was Blavatsky, the intermediary is Alice Bailey, and another initiate. He said, will arise. I think he even mentions the year 2010 at some point.
Wow,
said the person will use radio, will be used a lot, from 1975 onwards. That's actually the year I did my first radio interview.
No
but
way.
he says, that other teachings and so on will be revealed. I think, although he doesn't specify Jesus, I don't think, and so on, but I think that's all part of what would have happened, would have been a plan, but it would have been very different. And here, the point being made here would have been post-Armageddon, as described in the book of Revelation. Not saying the book of Revelation as we have it now, being through many translations and so on, is completely accurate. That's another thing with the 12 blessings. You've got it on tape.
Yes.
You've got the exact words as delivered in a pluperfect way through Dr. King.
He continues, so go forward with our support. You dedicated ones in our society are the bedrock of humanity's future, which must be built first and foremost in your realm. We know this, and we often are overcome with love when we see you fighting the waves of fear and doubt which permeate your realm. Bravo, my friends. God's blessings be upon you all.
I can feel that blessing. I don't know about you, as I
can
read it in the studio.
Yeah.
There's a lovely, lovely message. He's a lovely, I shouldn't say it, but he's a lovely, lovely man. He's a wonderful person with a beautiful vibration and a beautiful essence. He says, you're dedicated ones in our society. He's referring there to the Ethereal Society. He's not saying it's the only organization that matters at all. He's nothing like that, but it's a bedrock of humanity's future. Here's an interesting point. Must be built first and foremost on your realm.
Exactly. Go back to the point you made
Again,
at
the
the beginning.
stress, the importance of this realm. Now, when he said this, we know this and we often are overcome with love. I mentioned in a show we did last time about channeling, occasionally my little conscious mind picks up and questions a word, and I have to sort of suppress it or whatever. If possible, transmute it, but not regard it. And it happened with the word overcome. So when he said, we often are overcome with love, thought went through my brain quickly. Overcome, that's not right. But I had to put it aside. But it definitely came back, overcome with love.
Wow.
So that's quite something
What a
to
beautiful
be,
thing, isn't it?
Isn't it, really? It's a beautiful thing. I think he's probably the essence of what Christianity should be. Cosmic Christianity.
Yeah, call it that.
Yeah. We're seeing you fighting the waves and fear and doubt. And that's what we're doing. I mean,
That is the point
may
you
or may
made
not
in the
realize
beginning,
it.
isn't it?
Yeah. So bravo, and God's blessings be upon you all. John of Patmos.
Well, I certainly encourage people to find the message on the website if they want to read it again for themselves or play back this recording. But for me, this was an incredibly inspiring message to receive, and one that has outstanding revelations, I think, which really reflect on some of the original teachings that were there in the Bible and how the plan has changed. And for me, this is also helping us sort of like appreciate and keep up to date with the impact of the intervention of the Adepts and the role they played on our earth, the important role of Dr. King and the value of not just his mediumship, but what he gave us in practices like the 12 blessings, which we can use, as you've said, now that we have been sort of saved from this Armageddon, to work towards not only our own salvation, but the salvation of everyone on earth.
I couldn't add a single word to that, Darren. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you, John of Patmos.
And thank you, John of Patmos.
Hey, Spiritual Freedom Show family, thanks for tuning into the show. Well, that episode really blew my mind. Isn't it strange how our data dogma can become? Billions of people await the second coming and even Armageddon, And yet here we have in this particular message and in the teachings of the Aetherius Society, the truth about both of these things, that Armageddon has already happened, although not in the way that people anticipated, and that the Master Jesus and his chief disciple, St. Peter, no longer need to come to earth for that reason. Another Master will come to earth. That much has been prophesied as recently as 1958 in what is now known as the Lord's Declaration, given to Master of Yoga Dr. George King. And he will come, this new Master, to herald in the new age on earth. We know what we can do to make this the spiritual opportunity that it should be for humanity. And that is about turning to the light within us and devoting our lives in love and in service to others. If you enjoyed that episode about John at Patmos, then do follow, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes that can help you to awaken your chakras, unlock your psychic powers, and to discover true spirituality. Now, if you're interested in more right now, I recommend you check out our last episode in which we gave 5 different ways that you can look at any medium and be the judge for yourself about whether they are the real thing or not. Thanks for tuning into the show. See you next time.